This is the text-to-speech podfic reading of Scores by Ashata. They had won. Sirius was buzzing like a live wire. His cheekbone stung from the hit the asshat had got in, and he knew it was blossoming into purple, but he knew he had given better. And they had won. Every pass had seemed to find a stick as if by magnetism. Leo and the defense had blocked every shot. The team had been united in their determination to stop the snakes. The asshat had been ejected, and hopefully suspended. And Remus had scored. He had beautifully scored. Sirius's heart filled with pride and love at the memories of how Remus had played. He had played how Sirius always knew he could. With speed, and precision, and just so fucking beautiful. And now, Sirius was sitting in his stall, and he could feel the dopey smile on his face as he sat simply looking at Remus. He had gotten his jersey and pads off, and then been thoroughly distracted by watching Remus pull off his jersey and stand there in his bare skin and pads, the gorgeous idiot. He was gesturing animatedly with Talker and Sirius didn't even try to hide his staring.
Our boy did good, hey Cap.
Sirius startled at James's words. James was barely hiding a laugh under his smile.
Ouais, so good, Pats.
Sirius flicked his eyes to James as he spoke, but continued staring at Remus, his abs on display, his skates and hockey pants off now, but Under Armour and pads still on. James chuckled.
You gonna get changed, Cap? Or just stare at your boyfriend until you combust?
The word boyfriend seemed to summon Remus's gaze, and he locked eyes with Sirius. They both broke into even bigger smiles before Remus's gaze turned into a smirk as he watched Sirius ogle him. Remus's gaze settled heavily and meaningfully at Sirius's own Under Armour, which Sirius now noticed was feeling rather tight and uncomfortable. He shook himself into action.
D'accord. Right. Time to go on,
he said into the air, but with his eyes still locked to Remus's, his meaning taken perfectly. James laughed and shook his head, heading for his own shower. The team cycled through the showers quickly, everyone laughing and teasing freely, riding the high of the game and the win. Sirius thought he was getting dressed as quickly as possible, but he was shirtless and pulling on his dress pants when he looked up to see Remus standing in front of him, already ready to go.
Oh geez, baby, turns out they need me for interviews. I'll just be 20 minutes.
Sirius felt his face fall in disappointment and horror.
Absolutely not. We tackled to them already. Allons-y.
Remus laughed softly and stepped into Sirius's space, gently running his knuckles over Sirius's abs.
I was just fucking with you, baby. You ready yet?
Sirius threw on the rest of his clothes and eagerly took Remus's outstretched hand and let himself be led out the door.
Good game, Loops.
Finn yelled after them.
Wait, Cap, don't you want to stay and...
But James's teasing was left behind with the rest of the team's farewells as they left the locker room and walked down the tunnel hand in hand. In record time they were seated in the SUV, Sirius driving and Remus hooking up music, the air charged with electricity.
Ré, baby, that was just so incredible. You were amazing.
Remus smiled up at him and took his hand across the console.
It felt good.
Good doesn't even begin to cover it. You.
Sirius hardly knew where to start and Remus cut him off.
How's your cheekbone feel? You didn't get hurt anywhere else, did you?
My what?
Sirius felt Remus trace his fingers over the tender area.
Oh, right. Non, I am fine. The AST est à intermission. I don't even feel it.
Remus laughed softly.
You might feel differently about that tomorrow.
Sirius could feel his gaze on him.
You didn't need to fight him for me, but you did look pretty hot dropping gloves like that.
Sirius laughed.
As if I could have done anything differently. I'm just glad the ref heard all the fucking slur that came out of his mouth. I'm not sure I could have focused on the game if he hadn't been kicked out.
Let's never let him cross our minds again. We win.
Sirius hummed in agreement and was thankful to realize they were on their street. Home. Seeing Remus shift in his seat to undo his seatbelt and grab his bag brought back a memory from the ice.
That spin move loops, in the third, when you completely broke number 20's ankle and spun by him to dish the puck to Finn. It's going to be all over the highlight reels.
Remus laughed at Sirius's gushing as they each climbed out of the SUV.
You looked pretty amazing out there too, love. That was the best part. Playing with you.
They had made it inside the door, and Sirius had Remus against it almost before it was closed.
Hum.
He hummed into his lips, and they crashed together.
Bu that goal.
Remus laughed against his mouth, their chests pressed together.
Okay, yes, the goal felt pretty great too.
Oh, merde. And in the first, I thought for a second you were going for a Michigan.
Remus broke off, snorting.
As if I'd try a Michigan in my rookie season. Get laughed out of the league when I leave the puck behind on the ice by mistake.
You wouldn't miss.
Sirius ghosted the words across his lips through another kiss.
I barely practice it. I don't need another reason for the comms to doubt me.
No one's doubting you now.
Sirius was working his way along Remus's jaw, kissing fiercely, trying to express the feelings buzzing through him.
No one with eyes can doubt you now.
Kissing Remus's neck wasn't enough, and Sirius started reaching for their belts, uncoordinatedly trying to undo both at the same time. Remus laughed, and before Sirius knew what was happening, his arms were empty and Remus was halfway up the stairs. Sirius growled and took off after him, not catching him until Remus was in their bedroom, already with his shirt off and hands on his own belt.
I want you.
Remus said simply, huskily, and the words went straight to Sirius's heart and cock. They both felt the temperature of the room rise while each eagerly took off their own clothes. They crashed together again and Sirius traced his hands up and down Remus's sides as they kissed. He could hardly believe it. He had his beautiful boyfriend in his arms. His boyfriend who he got to win hockey games with. Who he got to chase across the house as foreplay. He felt full to bursting, and dropped to his knees. He needed to do something with his energy. Remus moaned immediately as he felt the warm heat of Sirius's mouth engulf him. Sirius loved the feeling of Remus filling his mouth, of the soft skin and heady taste. But he also couldn't get the image of this ass, that was currently in his hands, skating expertly down the ice, out of his head. Sirius pulled off slightly.
And the way you came up the side was fucking incredible. I know.
He swallowed down half of Remus's length.
You're so fucking beautiful out there.
He mouthed along the side of his shaft, murmuring compliments until Remus was dizzy from the words and the half-satisfying touch.
Really can't handle it sometimes.
Sirius was trying to talk with only the tip in his mouth, and Remus laughed in frustration, tugging Sirius's hair so he could look up at him.
You can talk about the game if you're kissing my neck. If your mouth is anywhere else, it's time to focus on that. Okay?
He moaned through the last word, as Sirius had nodded, and taken Remus down to the root. Remus couldn't help thrusting his hips forwards into the heat. He had a few deep strokes and his lust bloomed outwards, replacing the adrenaline and joy he had been feeling moments before. Then.
Ow.
Remus pulled away instinctively from the scrape of teeth. He had been mid-thrust while Sirius had been about to try to use his mouth to talk again.
Oh shit. Sorry mon.
Get your ass on the bed.
Remus pointed, his eyes blown dark. It hadn't been much more than a light scrape, and hadn't deterred Remus's hardness at all.
Getting my ass on the bed.
Remus shook his head in exasperation as Sirius eagerly settled himself back on the pillows, still strumming with excited energy. Remus bent over him, kissing him deeply, but briefly, before Sirius was speaking again.
The goal, Loops, the goal. You found the cornet, snuck it right on.
He gushed. Remus laughed deep in his throat but broke him off with another kiss. Remus ground his hips down, seeking the friction he had lost since losing the heat of Sirius's mouth.
Yeah, I think you've mentioned it once or twice.
He worked his lips over Sirius's neck.
Or 10 times.
I'm just so proud of you, Ray. You were so good out there. You're skating.
Remus's Midwestern sensibilities and lust-filled brain had tolerated about as many compliments as they could for one evening.
Sirius. Baby. Stop. Talking.
Remus sat up, shifting up the bed.
I need you.
His knees were now settled on either side of Sirius's broad shoulders, cock poised above his mouth. They locked eyes and Sirius, blessedly, only nodded. He paused in his gentle thrust forward.
If you use your teeth in a non-sexy way again, Sirius, you'll regret it. I won't get you off tonight if you bite me again.
His tone was mock serious to start with, but progressed to the deep commanding tone that Sirius could disregard as well as he could disregard breathing. Sirius nodded again, mouth opening. Thoughts of the game were floating away in the presence of his boyfriend's hard cock just above his mouth.
Focus,
he said to himself as he greedily opened his mouth and felt the hard length slide into his mouth. But he needn't have bothered with the pep talk. Once he was filled with Remus's cock, nothing was going to intrude his thoughts again. He felt so filled and so surrounded, with Remus's strong body above him and the insistent weight against his tongue, against his throat. Remus was looking down at him while he thrust it into his mouth, his eyes as full of love as lust. Remus had one arm braced against the headboard and his other traced Sirius's jaw, circled through his hair, followed the curve of the lip spread around his cock. Sirius moaned and turned his head into the touch. He traced his own hands firmly up and around Remus's hips and ass, then tapped twice to get Remus's attention. Remus pulled away reluctantly, glancing down warily.
I swear to God, Sirius, if you talk to me about passing again.
Sirius was too far gone to spar now.
Non, just, lube. Donne-moi le lube.
Remus could hardly argue with that, and quickly shifted over to reach for it and placed it in Sirius's hands. He resettled himself above Sirius, running his hand through Sirius's damp curls again.
Is this still okay?
He asked softly. Sirius said nothing, just nodded, biting his lip gently before licking his lips and opening his mouth. Remus heard him flick the lube bottle open. Remus moaned deeply as he settled back into the all-encompassing heat, feeling his body begin to build tension from deep inside his core. He thrust in, drew out, and in again, deeply yet carefully. The adrenaline of the day had fully morphed into desire and Remus was feeling the wonderful tunnel vision of pleasure erasing the rest of the world. Remus startled at the feeling of a contrasting coldness behind him, which resolved itself into the feeling of Sirius's slick fingers against his entrance.
Holy shit, baby, yes?
Remus croaked. He had vaguely thought Sirius would be using the lube on himself, but this was everything. He filled Sirius's mouth as Sirius's fingers filled him and his brain began sparking, not able to choose between the aching pleasure from behind or the slick heat in front. So he rocked back and forth, hands barely holding him up on the headboard. The dual stimulation on top of the adrenaline high had him barreling towards release. He had a moment of clarity to look down and check on his love. Sirius's mouth was stretched impossibly wide, his eyes fixed on Remus, blown dark, his dark curls a mess beneath his head. Sirius twirled his tongue around in his mouth as best as he could with Remus's cock filling him so completely. Sirius's hips were bucking at the air, fruitlessly searching for friction. As Remus's movements began to lose their coordination, Sirius used his fingers inside and his other hand on Remus's hip to keep the pounding rhythm, moaning with each thrust into his mouth. Remus lost his sense of caution and let his hips thrust fully, seeking the deep heat and friction of Sirius's throat. Remus felt the cord inside him snap at the vibrations inside Sirius's mouth and throat and the press of the fingers inside him. He buried himself deep as he shuddered and cried out Sirius's name. Remus was so deep Sirius barely tasted or felt the cum at all. But the taste permeated his mouth as Remus stayed there, collapsed against the head of the bed, shivering with aftershocks. Sirius breathed more deeply than he had for many minutes as Remus softened in his mouth, and slipped his fingers out of his body. They both caught their breath for a few moments, and then Remus heaved himself up, and threw himself down on his belly facing the other end of the bed. He looked over his shoulder.
Fuck me, baby.
Sirius surged up, his hard cock reminding him of his fruitless quest for friction minutes ago.
Are you sure? You can go again, mon loup?
Absolutely. Come here.
Sirius didn't need to be told twice. He got up onto his knees and reached for the bedside table, grabbed a towel from the stack they kept there and wiped his hand. Then he placed the towel over a pillow and helped Remus lift his hips and placed the pillow under him.
I'm ready, baby, come on.
Sirius's vision was tunneled. He saw the strong back muscles of his love, curving down into his strong ass. His gaze traveled back up to the honey curls splayed around the profile of such a beautiful face. He ran his hands up and down that beautiful back, feeling every dip and curve until Remus was moaning and moving with the touch of Sirius's hands. More lube, and then Sirius reached under Remus's hips again, lifting him up slightly, urging his left leg out and up. Remus complied eagerly, vainly trying to find Sirius with a small thrust backwards. Sirius met him halfway and filled him to the hilt with one strong thrust. They gasped together, both arching into the other, seeking every point of connection they could.
Mon loup, my love.
He gasped as he began to thrust. Remus moaned in response, and yelled into the blanket below him when Sirius's angle found the spot that lit him up with each pass. Sirius kept one arm under Remus's hips, helping to hold him up, but collapsed down onto his other elbow, draping his body over Remus's. His thrusts turned deep and small, dragging all sorts of beautiful noises from the beautiful boy below him. Sirius murmured near Remus's ear.
You're so beautiful when you play, mon loup. You're so good. You did so good.
Remus shuddered under both the praise and the weight and fullness above him.
You feel so good, mon loup. I love the taste of you in my mouth.
Sirius's voice altered between rasping sexily and gasping out syllables between moans. He knew the effect his words had on Remus, but his boy deserved all the praise Sirius could lavish upon him. Sirius found Remus's hard cock with the hand that was wrapped around his hip and it rocked in and out of his fist, following the force of each push of his cock. Remus's hand reached backwards to Sirius's hair, tugging with each movement.
Yes, Sirius, yes.
He moaned, again and again. Sirius kept up his strokes until he could feel himself near to bursting and felt Remus again stuttering in his attempts to meet Sirius's thrusts. He murmured in his ear, as coherently as he could.
You, Remus, you are so good.
Drawing out the last word with as much sultry intention as he could. He delighted in the spill of heat over his hand and the tightening around his cock and let himself fall over the edge of pleasure, stuttering a few more thrusts as he spilled inside his love. They collapsed together, completely spent from the game, from the sex, from the emotional highs of the day. They breathed raggedly for long minutes, Sirius draped over Remus's back.
I love you so much, mon cœur.
Sirius murmured into Remus's ear.
I love playing hockey with you, I love fucking you, I love chasing you around the house, or cooking dinner, or cuddling, or, well, everything. You're my everything.
Remus's heart, already as full as it could be, somehow spread heat through his body again. He shifted and rolled underneath Sirius, so they could lay chest to chest, their legs, and lives, intertwined. Remus ran one hand up and down Sirius's back and the other traced his cheek gently.
You're everything to me too, baby. My best friend, my captain, my lover. But even without winning hockey games, you're all I'll ever need.
Sirius smiled into his neck as he nuzzled close.
But winning hockey games together is pretty amazing, no?
Remus laughed.
Yes, oh my god, it felt so fucking good to win. And to score, baby, geez, it felt so good.
And blanketed in each other they, with nothing else pressing for their mouths to do, finally descended into recounting every moment of the game. Hockey nerds. Finite. Thanks for listening to this text-to-speech podfic composed by Burning Aurora.